Hello and welcome to Worst Quality Crab. We are a podcast of Asian American stories and recipes from best quality hearts. I'm your host, Freesia Lee. Joining me as always is my husband and producer, Sam.
Hello.
On this podcast, we bring on Asian American guests, sometimes diaspora guests, and they talk about growing up Asian in America through the lens of a childhood food, favorite dish, or food story. I know that we're all here for Bruce Lee Day. Oh, listeners at home, we're recording live from the Asian Art Museum. I forgot to mention that. Thank you, Asian Art Museum. Yes, exactly. We're here on Bruce Lee Day. We are not going to talk about Bruce Lee as much. We're here to get to know Jeff. Our guest today, Jeff Chang, writer, cultural organizer, host of Notes from the Edge, a show and podcast from KALW, and most recently, author, Water Mirror Echo, Bruce Lee and the Making of Asian America. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you for having me.
Woo!
Yeah.
We're very excited to have you here. I have a confession. When I saw that this book was coming out, I mentioned to Sam a few times, I was like, should we try to get Jeff Chang on the show? Should we try? And he was like, yeah, we should. And I was like, okay. And then I never worked up the nerve to DM you or email or reach out. But it all worked out because now we get to do this here live.
Yeah, here we are.
Yeah, so we're super excited. We're going to talk about the book at some point, but what we do on the show is talk about foods. And this is real funny because you have brought a childhood dish for us to talk about that Sam and I actually have been looking for someone to talk about this with because it was a childhood dish for both of us. So, will you please tell us what this memorable dish was and who was making it, what's it like, where were you eating it? Give us all the backstory.
Wow. So, first of all, I have a confession to make, which is that when I was asked to be on this podcast, I started getting on my feels about like how legit like Asian I was. Yeah.
Wait, oh my
so
God.
I don't know if is this a thing with you all and your guests at all?
To a degree, yeah, actually. Yeah. So funny you mentioned that because when we started this podcast, I was in my feels about it.
Really?
Yeah, because so I'm half white for those of you who don't know. And thank you. Yes, Hapas unite. But I sort of was like, oh, I could host this podcast, but I don't know if I could be a guest on my own show because I didn't feel Asian enough. And I didn't grow up with Asian cooking in the home. And I was like, I don't really have a childhood Asian dish. And then thankfully Sam was like, no, that's not the point. It could be anything. You are in fact Asian enough. You are it. But then I did think of one dish that was my Asian dish, and you pick it up from there because it's the same.
Oh, okay.
So tell me more about your feels.
Okay, so I grew up in Honolulu, Hawaii. I'm of Chinese and Native Hawaiian descent, Kanaka Maoli descent. And the Chinese side on my father's side, sort of fourth, sort of third generation, because my great-grandfather migrated, then my grandfather, he took my grandfather back to China. They were in the war there, and so my grandfather remigrated to Honolulu at the age of 17. And then my mom's side, I think 7 generations at least now. We're trying to do our full genealogy. We traced it back at least 7 generations. Of course, the Hawaiian side's been in the islands, for hundreds and hundreds of years. Both my grandmothers were really incredible cooks. They were just so good. But it didn't carry down. It didn't carry down to my dad. My dad used to make these things called Dagwood sandwiches, which were just based on the Blondie cartoon or whatever. It was 2 pieces of white bread, eggs, Spam, Vienna sausage, whatever was in the fridge. Just slap it together and that's dinner, guys. And my mom was, I think, a pretty decent cook, but she didn't cook she cooked to eat. Let's put it that way. She didn't necessarily cook to enjoy things. Nowadays, she's by herself and she loves to eat blueberries and bananas and popcorn. So I have to go home and cook for her.
Wait, that sounds pretty good though.
Yeah, I mean, she's living her best life.
Antioxidants,
in her
potassium.
Yeah, and I guess she's getting roughage through the popcorn
That's
and
right.
stuff.
Fiber.
Protein, I don't know.
Well,
protein is
Is
a
that
little-
just some sort of weird hustle to get you to cook for her?
I think it is, and that's why I'm back on the island so much. It's sort of like, I don't think it's a threat or an explicit threat, but I do go back and cook for her. And so I've over the years, I've learned to kind of make these dishes that I didn't really learn, from my parents and my grandparents, which I wish I just would have been more into learning. But you're 5 years old. You're just eating. So this dish that my grandmother on my dad's side used to make was a dish that was with ground pork and fish cake. And she would mix it up. She'd add some green onions to it. She'd add chopped up minced water chestnuts and a little bit of soy sauce, a little bit of oyster sauce, and mix it all up. And then she'd form it into patties and she'd fry it in a skillet.
Okay. Yeah.
Just lightly, just
Yeah.
not too much, just to get it brown and a little bit sort of crunchy on the outside. And then she'd put it in a steamer and she'd steam it
Wow.
for us. And then she'd pull it out, not too long, maybe 15 minutes or something like that.
Yeah.
Not too long, 15, 20 minutes. And then chop it up into these beautiful oval pieces that were so juicy, and we eat that over rice. And they called it hubao, which I've never heard anybody up here in California or anywhere on the continent, any number of Cantonese, Toisanese folks ever use that word to describe a dish. So I think it was just sort of the village dish that they made in their village in Jungsan. And my dad loved this dish so much that he told my mom, we're going to get married, but if you can't cook this dish, there's going to be problems. So
she learned. I assume?
And she
Okay.
became really, really good at it. And that's what we'd have. This would be comfort food. We'd probably have it once a week or something like that. It was just a thing to be able to have. And we were always wanting leftovers and all that kind of stuff for that. It was just, you could eat it with anything. You'd eat it over rice, but you could eat it for breakfast with some scrambled eggs or something like that. You could eat it by itself with just some oyster sauce and all that kind of thing. And it was just, I don't know, it's just for me, it evokes a lot of really good memories of being a kid and also going to my grandparents' place and playing with all my cousins. We had a zillion cousins. I still do. They've grown, they've had kids, so there's zillions of cousins, second cousins, third cousins, nephews, nieces, whatever we call them. And we don't eat this dish as much anymore. So I think when we went back this year, my wife Lourdes and I were like, Mom, can you make that for us? And it was fun because we had to go to Chinatown and get the kind of fish cake that they make in Chinatown in Honolulu. I think they have it there. Maybe they have it at Foodland, which is a very Asian-themed supermarket or local-themed supermarket. Maybe they don't. I don't know. But it was one of those very special things. And Lourdes made it, and I practically cried. It was amazing. Yeah. It was so good.
So you learned to make it. She's
Yeah.
right here. You learned to make it?
Yeah. We were having the fun.
Oh.
Yeah. We can't find the fish cake. I think it's I think the fish cake in Hawaii is just made out of akule, which is a small fish that runs in large schools. And I think it's just a specific kind of fish thing. My mom said fish cake could be made out of mullet or, different types of fish.
Is it raw or pre-cooked?
It's raw.
Okay.
So it's a pink
Oh.
kind of pasty thing. They put it in a little plastic bowl
Yes.
and then we mix it all up with our hands and yeah.
Okay. This sounds delicious, first
It
of
is.
all.
My mouth is watering right now.
Yeah.
I want a plate of it.
So the reason that this was so interesting for us is when I said I didn't have a Chinese dish that really spoke to my childhood. Our version of this, yours sounds better, not gonna lie. But my version of this growing up was Sam, what's it called? Juyukbang?
Juyukbang.
Yeah. Right. So it's the Kanto version. It's all steamed. It's big. Put it in a bowl, a shallow pan, and then steam it on top of your rice. And for me, on top of, so you can steam it in the rice at the same time, which is also why it's great. We have it with our kids now. For me, for some people, it's salted fish. For me, it was sliced lap charong. And that's how Chinese sausage. So we make it that way now, but we've been wanting someone else to bring it and talk about it because we're like, well, we can't just like talk about this dish between the two of us because then it's just us talking to each other.
We could have.
We could have, I guess. It's not the same. But
Wait, so does it have the same kind of consistency of the thing that I'm describing, do you think? Like,
I'm not sure because the frying it before you steam it is new to me. Is it like loose fried or is it
loose fried. So she would
Okay.
pack it very lightly. It's just to get it browned on the outside.
Oh, okay.
that
but-
sounds so much
yeah.
better.
That's like extra flavor.
Yeah, extra flavor, right? You get all the brown bits and then it's steamed and then the juices over the rice. We should try this.
Yeah.
I feel a YouTube video coming on where you're making this for
That's exactly, yeah.
for the rest of us.
Let's
Yes.
get a fourth mic. Yes, indeed.
Fans
yes.
want it.
Yeah.
You talked about a lot of cousins. Is this a dish amongst all of your cousins as well?
Yeah. And then, so my grandmother on my mom's side was a cook. She just was one of those people that just loved to cook. She ended up getting a job at the Air Force Base as a chef. And she was just a really, really good cook. So my mom brought it to her, and she started making it, but she would put salt eggs in it. And she didn't, right?
We got some
Oh, okay,
agreement
okay.
here, yeah.
So she would steam it in the like the dishes that you would eat noodles and stuff in, and have the little, what are those things called that you just lift it out? Or
yeah.
whatever.
Oh yeah, that's how we do it.
You know what I'm
yeah.
talking about? Yeah.
Clampers.
Yeah, 3-prong.
Yeah.
Yeah. We used to like play with them, like make pretend they were spaceships. But man, you guys are bringing out a lot of stuff that I've never talked about.
I used to pretend I was Wolverine and just like hold it like.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I could totally see that.
Don't show our kids,
awesome.
please. I mean, you could. It's fine.
You mentioned
Yeah.
you had some feels when thinking about your dish for this show. Like, what kind of feels did it bring up?
I guess, so I grew up, like I said, fourth, third generation, my dad's side, seventh on my mom's. And when I came here, I was just very aware that I was not Chinese American in the same way that my friends from San Francisco or Oakland, Chinatown were Chinese American. And they never shamed me for it. But I was just always very aware that there was a lot of stuff that I actually culturally maybe didn't know, that I was maybe more local, Hawaii. We can use a capital with local, right? There's a certain identity that comes with being local in Hawaii and to Hawaii. That's different from being, I think, even like seventh generation San Franciscan Chinese, Chinese American. So I don't know if Arthur Dong will mind this, but I remember I met Arthur Dong, the great documentarian of Chinese Americans in Hollywood. Probably a few years ago, I was interviewing him, and he's like, listening to the way that I said Chinese names, and he's like, "Where are you from?" He was like, I don't understand your accent. Like, you don't make any sense to me. And I was like, oh, yeah. It's because, then I explained, you know what I mean? He was like, yeah, you're weird. But yeah, that was sort of like how I felt about it. So I was thinking about, like, you guys are talking about dishes. And, like, that particular dish means so much to me. But then, like I said, I never found anybody here on the continent who's like, that's exactly. So even for you guys just to say now, like we ate something like this, it reminded me I was interviewing Judge Mark Chow in Seattle, who's a really important person for the research for the book, because his mom was Ruby Chow,
Yes. Yeah. Talk
who
about this.
was Bruce's boss, auntie, landlord, disciplinarian when Bruce was living in Seattle. So when I was talking with Mark, he was talking about how Ruby would make these dishes or have these dishes made in the way that they ate it in Cantonese American households. And he described this dish, and I was like, oh, that's hubea. But he didn't even use that term. He used the term that you guys use, right? Yukbeng? Yeah. But that actually got me on the road to, like, where Lourdes and I were literally asking my mom, like, please make this for us, It sounded exactly like the same thing. So, so it's just sort of me having feels, trying to reconnect.
Two things. One, it's like wild for me personally, again, half white, but like for you to say you didn't feel Asian enough, because I look at you and I'm like, no, definitely it. It checks all the boxes. Also, like, Hawaii is so Asian that I'm like, oh, obviously, like there is no question. And I think it's interesting what you bring up, because in getting ready for this, I was thinking about like when I was in college and a little bit after, and meeting people who didn't grow up here and they were like from kind of rural towns. And they're like, you don't know the struggle. Like you grew up where it was Asian. And I was like, I don't, but it doesn't mean I'm without it. Like it's different, right? Because we're still in this country. So I guess from my perspective, I'm like, you're very Asian. I don't know what you're talking about, but I get it.
Like, I know Japanese American cuisine or Japanese cuisine maybe in some ways better than I do some of, Chinese cuisines in some ways. Certainly Hawaiian. Like, I was living for a summer in Provincetown, and there's all these Portuguese fishermen there, historically. So I would go into a Portuguese diner, and I'd be like, oh, shoot, I know all of these dishes. Like, I ate all these dishes growing up. So in some ways, like, it's a weird kind of thing to be like, oh, you're super Asian and also not Asian enough, right? In a way. Yeah.
I have a question about how you actually eat this dish. So when I was growing up and my mom made it, my dad had a specific way he liked eating it. And it was to, like, after it comes out of the steamer, mash it all up in the dish, and then, like, serve it individually. As I got older, I learned that people don't typically eat it that way. Like, they, like, break up, like, a pizza slice of
Yes, correct.
pork and then put it on their rice and then pour the sauce on top of all that on their own personal bowl. Like, how did you or your family eat that?
So they're patties, right? So she would just slice them. And then we get these oval slices, and we just would eat that on our rice. But then it would always come with all that amazing, juice and stuff like that. So we'd scoop that on our rice. And then she might make like some bok choy or greens to go with it. Or maybe even like bean sprouts with a little bit of bacon and some soy sauce and some white pepper to go with that. So that's how we would eat it. But like I said, we could eat it with anything. You could eat it for breakfast the next morning. Mm-hmm. Like I would dice up the pieces and put it into fried rice. Like we'd eat it all kinds of ways, I guess. But we ate it more like it was a meat patty or a fish patty or something like that.
Right. I think the funny thing is, like, after I learned that most people don't eat it like that, I was like, oh, my dad, like, messed it up and he made us eat it this weird way. But then after starting to make it myself for our family, it's like, oh, he does have a point where it's like the juices kind of stay in the mash. If you were to eat it the next day or something like that, it doesn't dry out. So, either way.
And then, like, every bite has, like, the savory and the sweet and the salty.
Exactly, right? Yeah. So maybe he had a point.
I still like it my way. It's fine. Jeff, you talked about Ruby Chow making this at her restaurant, which I thought was really interesting because the way you describe the restaurant in the book, it's very much like the fancy Chinese of the day, and she was really catering to a white audience, white palates. So it's really interesting to hear this dish that I think of as very much like a home cook, like home comfort food that she was then kind of, slinging to white people and making them pay more for it.
Yeah, I think it's the beginnings. Like, Ruby cracked the code for, like, where we're at now, right? Where we'll pay, like, whatever, $50 for a comfort food dish from, like, name your ethnic cuisine type of thing at any restaurant. But she had cracked the code very early on. And so, like, her clientele, like you said, is all, like, the elite, the white elite of Seattle society. The politicians, the leadership class, the super rich people who are coming in, and she'd be like, hey, here, try this. And they trusted her enough that they would try it. And they'd be like, oh, wow, this is delicious. Like, what is this? And then she'd come up with, I don't know what name she came up with for that, but she'd come up with like some sort of a, you know, white sounding name for
Yeah,
it
yeah.
and stuff. Yeah.
Like sea treasures in a land fields. Matt, I don't know. Yes. That's amazing. You know, I don't know. But pivoting a little bit into the book. So we do want to talk about the book. The book is amazing. I said this earlier in a book talk. I'll say it again. One of the best books I've probably ever read, certainly in a long time. And it's really two books. It would be on its own a phenomenal Bruce Lee biography and on its own a phenomenal AAPI book. So congrats and thank you.
Thank you.
Listen, we talk about childhood here and how that made you who you are today. How did little Jeff in Hawaii end up writing this book? That's a big question, I know, but like, let's try it. Actually, here, I got a better question. That's a little more targeted. It's less broad. You talked about coming here and not feeling Asian enough, right? When you moved here, and then you got a degree in Asian American Studies. Was there some sort of like, I came, I didn't feel enough, I needed to learn? Or like, what was the draw?
I think, you know, you grew up in an island, and by the age of 17, well, even before that, 15 or maybe even 14 or 13 or whatever, you're like, wow, I've really figured out everything that it is to do on this island. You know? Yeah. And so you're like, you're looking for fun in all kinds of other ways. And so hip hop came in when I was like about 13 or something like that. And in the form of like Rapper's Delight, this record coming in from New York City and stuff, and everybody in the island wanting to learn all the lyrics. And that starts making me really curious about like what's out there. I'd already been exposed via late night. I really was into music, to like reggae music. Like you'd hear it on the FM freeform station on the slopes of Haleakala and Maui, bouncing over when there was like a volcano eruption or there was a big storm, because the signals would be bouncing off the clouds and you get the signal coming in clear and you'd hear reggae music. I'm like, reggae music, wow. But this like felt like something that was really close to home because the folks who were doing it were kids like us. So I was already kind of fantasizing about what like the continent was like and all that type of thing. And music was kind of the link for me. So when I came, I was like determined to do two things: to go to as many concerts as I possibly could, and to like just dive into all of the cultural things that I couldn't get in Honolulu. What happened though was I started getting targeted in the streets because I look like the way I do. So in one way I was feeling not Asian enough, and then in some ways I was feeling too Asian, because I could just walk down the street by People's Park. I was going to Cal, and even freaking peaceful hippies would be like calling me chink or whatever, you know? Frat guys like harassing me and my Chinese American or Asian American friends just standing on the corner because we're Asian American, same thing, calling us all kinds of racial slurs and names and stuff. And I was like, wow, like I've never been on this. I've been called chink before by white folks in Hawaii, by haoles in Hawaii, but it doesn't sound the same or feel the same in Hawaii than when you're surrounded by like 15 drunk frat brothers who are kind of tossing you around and stuff and making fun of you.
Yeah.
Right? So that was what actually started leading me towards like, okay, and you're 18, so you're already like, who am I? Right? So all of that kind of led me towards what became like, I took an Asian American Studies class in my first year in my spring semester, and that kind of plunged me into this whole sort of who am I type of bit. So I think that was my entry point into really, that was me, like Bruce, like we talked about Bruce, like coming to Seattle and learning what it means to be a racial minority. That was me, at 18 years old, learning what it meant to be a racial minority for the first time.
What was it like for you researching the book and that portion of Bruce's life and like relating that to yourself? Or were you kind of having those realizations in the moment, or
Well, I mean, yeah. So I lived this, right? So I had been on this journey and stuff, and I guess like as I was researching through Bruce's life, like there were different points at which I'd be like, oh, yeah, that's what he was thinking at that point, or that's probably what he was thinking. Then I go and look into his papers, and I look at and talk to his friends and his family members, and they'd be like, well, not really, or they'd be like, yeah, that's exactly it, And so I think, for me, when we were in our earlier session, I had told the story about me thinking about my grandfather and how my grandfather's life was very much like Bruce's, being born in Hanalei, going back to war in China, then remigrating, right? Bruce being born in San Francisco, going back to Hong Kong and war, remigrating when he's 18 to San Francisco and then going up to Seattle. But for me, I think like I was really taken by his Seattle years because for me, they kind of mirrored, not maybe mirrored is a wrong word, but I could relate to like him trying to figure out who he was in Seattle, even as an immigrant, because I felt like an immigrant from Hawaii. Like the cultural divide was that deep, coming from Hawaii to even just California. The cultural divide was that deep. So I felt like an immigrant. And I think that as I went through the story, I could be like, oh, those parts are like my family story. Those parts are like my friends' family stories or the extended family, the family that I married into, all of those things. So, yeah.
I think it's hard enough to write a biography of a legend like Bruce Lee. Did you feel another layer of pressure to write it from an Asian American perspective?
I think pressure isn't necessarily the word. I think that it was what I wanted to do. And also it was something that I had to actually actively work on through the entire process. Because at certain points I'd be like, wow, if I tell all these stories about Bruce as an Asian American or as an immigrant or, that kind of thing, is that going to get in the way of the mythology of Bruce? Like, are people even going to want to read this? Are people going to stop reading? Like, as a writer, your job is to make people continue to turn the page, right? Especially now, right? Like, it's hard enough putting a book into somebody's hands. So to get them from page 1 to page 560, I was worried about that. And I think I was saying earlier, right, in our earlier session, like, I gaslit myself a lot. I was like, nobody's going to want to read this. Why would I want to read this? Why would they want to read this? They're going to shut the book and put it down. And I don't doubt that there's a lot of folks that are doing it, but at different points, people would kick me in the ass. Can I say that on your podcast?
Yes, you can say all the words.
They would fucking kick me in the ass.
Thank you.
To make sure that I would stay on point, on my job. Lourdes kicked me in the ass repeatedly. And so
good job.
That's why we're here,
I mean, if I could counter for a moment, for every person that picks this up and is like, Bruce Lee book, I put it down because AAPI, I think there is another person that's like, maybe Bruce Lee, but AAPI, yes. And then for those people, me as those people, honestly, even more meaningful, right? Because I think that they're the people that like know and love Bruce and so they'll buy the book and they're like, meh, okay, cool. And they'll add it to their stack of Bruce Lee books, which is fine. And then there's everyone else who is like, oh no, I'm interested in this intersection. And the thing that is actually most powerful is everything else outside of it. Like Bruce is the vehicle for a lot of this storytelling, but I think everything that you do underneath is what the moment needs too. Like what we need now, what is propelling so much of the culture forward. And so I think that you have probably made a lot of Bruce Lee fans from the AAPI angle of this book. And so like, congratulations on that because
thank you.
I mean, I think we watched the documentary and so like I knew some of these stories. Bao Win's documentary?
Bao Win's.
And it, I learned a lot and it was really good. And also like to read it and the way that you tell the story is so powerful. And then to intertwine everything that's happening culturally, I think makes it that much richer and gives it so much more context. And also, hard pivot, but like Can you talk about the archives? Like this, you get so in depth in this book in ways where I'm like, but was Jeff there? Like, how is this possible? It's so intimate. It's such beautiful writing on things that like seem impossible for you to know. Can you just talk about how did you do this?
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for all those kind words too. Yeah, I don't take it for granted. It means a lot actually to hear that. So Bao's project and my project, where I think of as sort of twin projects in a lot of ways. A really good friend of ours, Joy Yoon, had introduced us years ago, before Bao had the ESPN contract in hand. And I think I had my book contract in hand, but I was slow walking the book because I had other books I had to finish under contract. But we got to meet and we worked together a lot. And so we helped each other through the process. And so the movie, Be Water, the movie is the movie we're talking about, was an amazing type of thing. And Bao was able to assemble an amazing research team for that. And he allowed me to be able to look at the stuff that they had assembled. I actually was able to work with some of his research team folks in Hong Kong and London. And they help me develop a lot of stuff. I collected a lot of magazines from the period. So the Kung Fu magazines were the karate magazines were the first record of that part of the history. And then, like I said, I started doing that. I started sort of tiptoeing my way into the interviews and develop relationships with a lot of folks. And Shannon Lee was that one of those most important relationships, in that she allowed me to be able to go in and look at her father's papers and everything else. And so through all of that process, I got a lot of information. And I'm a research nerd. I took many years to kind of put this all together. And I would still be doing it if if we didn't have to eat, hubei or whatever we're going to eat. So yeah, so I did most of the writing over the last 3 years, realizing that I didn't have any other job. I had gotten rid of all my other jobs and was like, okay, we're going to finish this book. And that was the impetus. But I will say, once I started writing, and thank you to the folks at the Lucas Artist Residency at Montalvo Art Center, but they gave me some time to be able to write and just write with nothing else going on. Most of the writing got done in the last 3 years, and it just poured out. It came out. So that's how it came together. I don't know if that's the question you asked, but yeah.
I always got this funny picture in my head whenever the Bruce Lee Family Archives was referenced in the book. So theater of the mind, paint us a picture of what does that actually mean? Is it binders? Is it a fortress of solitude that you walk into and it's all Bruce Lee stuff? Physically, what are you interacting with when you're...
I was really lucky to come in after they had organized the archives into binders and into folders and papers and photos and all kinds of things. So I might have been one of the first folks to be able to get in there after that, Awesome. Before that, it was I don't know what it was like. But they had put it all together and stuff. So it's not like a library where you have all these different ways to cross-reference and dig through things. It's just a lot of sort of thematic folders and things like that with a lot of his papers in them. And Bruce wrote down everything. And to his family's credit, they saved everything. But Bruce was an inveterate sort of note-taker and scribbler and sort of diarist, and he just he kept records of all these kinds of things. I'm not sure why, Maybe he kind of thought that was a measure of how much he was progressing or that kind of thing. But he kept everything. And so we have all of those types of things. And over the years, there have been a lot of people who have gone through these notes and published them, actually. There's a whole library that John Little actually had curated for Tuttle books. And what I was trying to search for was those things would give me kind of clues and entry points as to what to look for. But what I was looking for outside of the archive and with his friends was ways to be able to understand what these notes kind of meant. And then I was doing deep research to find the sources of a lot of these notes. So a large portion of the book is footnotes, but that's also because over the years, you don't necessarily, like if you're reading a book and you like what's being said in there, you might just write it down on a piece of paper. Those are the kinds of notes that he had. I don't think that Bruce ever intended for them to be published, but in turn they get published and people begin to quote things that Bruce didn't necessarily say. They were just notes that he had taken from a particular book. So I was looking to try to find those original sources. And finally, I think the Wing Luke Museum in Seattle, big shout out to them, because Shannon had donated all the books in the library to the Wing Luke, and the Wing Luke has done the job of actually sorting them and classifying them and all that kind of stuff. And so I was able to go back to the books and literally find his notes in those books and to understand sort of the context in which he was reading them. So all of those kinds of things were things that I wanted to kind of recreate in the book. But we're in real deep research nerd land right now. I don't know if we want to extricate ourselves from this.
Kind of, but no, I'm kind of into it.
Okay.
But actually,
we are in a museum. And
yeah.
This is
That's kind of what I was thinking about, like our
Yeah.
conservationists and white gloves and things like that. But you mentioned something about, things that Bruce had said that people maybe misunderstood, misinterpreted, learning things that like he wasn't exactly what people thought he was, right? And sort of in the research and things like that. I'm curious what your relationship when you were little, like growing up with Bruce as legend, like how you thought of him when you were younger. And then, like we talked about earlier, like what was the journey from what you used to think of him to now?
Oh, I mean, he was a superhero, right? He was the person who could not be touched. And even if you touched him and stuff, he would just get angrier and like hurt you more. So he was everything, He was somebody who was beyond what we could ever be. But he was sort of that thing that we could look up to and be like, somebody like us became that. And I think that as I got deeper and deeper into the story, you start to find out about all of the different kinds of quirks that he has that are kind of funny or interesting or actually even off-putting sometimes as well. And that was all kind of a part of trying to re-center Bruce as somebody who walked on the earth just like we did, was not a perfect human being by any stretch of the imagination, but who overcame these great odds and these huge barriers to be able to accomplish what he did, which was to break the bamboo ceiling and be able to create a world in which we might have the possibility of being seen as more than, or less, not less than, but in our full selves, in our full humanity.
I don't know. I just want to gush about the book for a moment. I do this. Sorry, this is like if you listen to any of other podcasts where we do cookbooks and stuff, I kind of just gush at the author for a little while, which I haven't really done today because I've been trying to keep it cool. But I really, really do love this book. Here's a weird thing about a book about a person who their life ends. As I'm reading the book, I'm like, I don't want it to end, but I know where this is going. Was that hard for you? Yeah. What was that like?
It was really hard because, you start to realize the gap that he left. There's this weird kind of question that kind of gets asked in a lot of interviews, which is, okay, Jeff, how did Bruce die? And what's really interesting to me is that if you read a lot of narratives of Bruce's life, they begin with him dying. And that was one thing I vowed, like, I am not going to start with his death. Because we're not talking about him because of how he died. We're talking about him because of how he lived, right? I was just in Seattle, and people don't talk about how Kurt Cobain dies. People don't talk about how Jimi Hendrix died. They don't lead off their books with that. And yet, Bruce, for whatever reason, like that's been a way to start the narrative. And so, I was so in his life, I was so like trying to recover all of these different types of things, trying to piece together back to what it might have been like to be in Bruce's presence. And as I got closer and closer to the end of the book, I realized, wow, like the reason people ask this is because they still haven't processed that he's actually passed. There's a melancholy to it. I felt a deep, deep sadness as I was coming to the end of the book. And I think about like Bruceploitation movies. Like after Bruce dies, like there's years and years of all these movies with these characters who rename themselves Bruce Lee or Bruce Lai or Bruce Lee or Bruce Leong or whatever, Bruce Leroy. And there's just this desire that I think folks have. Like if you're, I'm just imagining like my older cousins in 1973, you know, Bruce Lee has passed away a month before you see him on Enter the Dragon, right? And he looks so alive, and yet you know he's dead. And there's just like this huge sadness about that if you think about it too hard. Capitalists will think about the demand for it. So that's what Bruceploitation's about. But it's all part of this melancholy. And the deep part of the melancholy I realized is, man, it took us 2 generations to make the next step beyond Bruce breaking through the bamboo ceiling. You know what I mean? Like 1 generation to get to Brandon, his son being of age, and he's on the verge of stardom, and then he dies, right, in this tragic accident. And then another generation to get to Michelle Yeoh, like winning the Oscar for not just playing a kung fu artist, but an under siege laundromat owner and a movie star, right, which she is, but playing all of these different types of things in that role that she plays in Everything Everywhere All at Once, and being able to see the full humanity of us in all these roles that she's playing, and then she receives the Oscar, right, for that, and thinking about Anna May Wong, who like couldn't get a part in The Good Earth, and the white actress who played her, who was a German immigrant, and they said like, we can't see a Chinese immigrant playing, but she wasn't an immigrant, she was born in the US. But letting a German immigrant play a Chinese woman and then giving her the Oscar for that, right? So
Scarlett Johansson. Sorry.
Well, okay, yeah. Emma Stone.
Emma Stone, yeah.
Right? So like we get all the way here, and then it takes us 50 years to be able to get to that point. 50 years after he's dead, like of course we've been melancholy about this. And so I felt like, wow. And people always ask that's the other question. Like, how did he die? And then flipping that, the other question is, what would have happened if he had lived? Right? And he hasn't. And that's the world that we are living in. And so, yeah, shit, I just said a lot of stuff there.
No, that was great. I mean, you did, and thank you. And I have heard that people have asked the what do you think would have happened if he had lived question. And I'm not going to ask that, because I think my question to you is like, why do you think people are so hung up on that?
On his...
Like the what if.
The what if?
Is it part of this melancholy? Is this part of this like longing?
Sure. Like, what if Bruce Lee had won an Oscar in 1978 for The Game of Death, which was a movie that he had designed and like was like actually writing? And I don't know that he would have. I don't know that he... But what if he had had a movie in which the director actually and the screenwriter actually were in sync with him, you know? As opposed to having to fight Orientalist stereotypes, or like producers in Hollywood who didn't see him as a main character. What if that had happened? Like all of that stuff it hurts too much to think about it actually. If we think about it too much, it really hurts. You know, it's really interesting too. I had a group of folks that were reading the first draft of the book, and we call them the firing squad. And there's a whole story behind this, but long story short, Kathy Park Hong read the first draft, and she said, Jeff, are you going to actually talk about how Bruce created this stereotype that we all had to frickin' live up to as well? She didn't say frickin', I just did.
Yeah.
She's much, more cleaner and less potty mouth than I am. But yeah.
You can say the real word too on here.
Okay.
It's fine.
But it fucking, was real. Like, I was like, oh my God, you know? Because I grew up different than my kids grew up. I grew up in Hawaii. My kids grew up in Berkeley. And even in Berkeley, and I'll just leave it at that, dot, right? And even in Berkeley. So getting around to that side of it was actually hard. I think I was blocking it out a lot. You know, getting to deal with the melancholy, getting to deal with the thing that they made a parody of Bruce as soon as he died. You know what I mean? Getting to like the meaning for it for his family. I mean, if we feel all these things, imagine what Shannon and Linda are feeling on a day-to-day basis, right? And that was something that Bao always reminded me of. For all of us, it's spectacle, but for them, like, they lost a brother, they lost a husband, they lost a father, you know? And with Brandon, same type of thing, right?
Yeah.
A son, a brother, a friend. It's spectacle. It's the curse of the dragon, in scare quotes, to all of us. But for them, this is what they're living through, you know? And so that was what I had to, like, kind of gird myself and kind of write towards as I was coming to the end of the book.
That's a lot.
Fuck.
I mean, listen, I know that you said you wanted to take a break after this because you've been on tour a lot and this book was a long time in the making, but like, what do you do after this as a writer?
I don't know. Taking ideas. Anybody got any suggestions? I don't know. Yeah, this was something that was very personal and it was very deep. And it's something that's going to stay with me, you know, for the rest of my life. And I don't know, you know, there's more that needs to be said and there's more that needs to be done. But I'm not ready to jump into that just
Sure,
yet.
yeah, that's fair. Before we wrap, because it's been a long day for you, we appreciate your time so much. And maybe this is like not a question you can answer or it's too wild, but like, what are your hopes for this book? Like, what do you hope this book goes out and does in the world?
Wow. I just hope that there are young folks, no matter what background, cultural, racial background, no matter what their identity is, that they might be able to kind of come to it and see a person whose life was very well lived and a person who was really about bringing folks together, you know. We end on a note of solidarity and this idea of what we might be able to bring to this. So, just to say, to go back to my childhood, right? I was deeply and profoundly influenced by Black music, by Black freedom culture, by the Black freedom movement. And I've often wondered, like, what is it that we bring, those of us who are of Asian and Pacific Islander background? You know, those of us who are of Asian and Pacific Islander descent in the continental U.S. What is it that we can bring to the discussion? And I think Bruce is a life that actually points in that direction, because he was about simplicity, directness, and freedom. And the last of those, this idea of freedom, in that you see Bruce as somebody who is always constantly reaching out to others. He is somebody who is constantly trying to lift up folks around him. And he doesn't speak in the language of the Asian American activists who are rising concurrently with him and who then create this whole idea of Asian America and give context for new generations to be able to come back to Bruce and understand what he meant. But I think that Bruce's life points to all of these different types of things. And I would hope that somebody reading it might be able to come away with the same type of thing, because that's what we kind of really need right now in this historical moment. You know, we need simplicity, we need directness, we need freedom, we need solidarity. We need to be able to be working on this for each other, with each other. So, yeah.
Not to blow a bunch of smoke up your ass, but I feel like your work does a lot of that too. solidarity, bringing people together, simplicity, building community. That is so much of this book. I think, your prior books as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for this one. I think we have monopolized so much of your day, and we appreciate it so much. Audience at here and at home, if you would like to find more of us, we are Worst Quality Crab on Instagram. You can find us at worstqualitycrab.com or email us at worstqualitycrabpod@gmail.com. Jeff, this is a question for Lourdes. If we could get a little handwritten note of the recipe so that we can try to make it ourselves, because don't tell my grandma, but it does sound better than what we are making. And I think I know a few listeners at home that would really love to try this as well. So
we have to videotape Mom.
Yeah, as long as it takes, we'll wait. Then we'll get it up on our website.
I would love if we had dinner together and made that for each other and just and kind of did a taste test.
Yes.
2 versions.
Or something
my God.
That. Yeah?
That's amazing.
This is so good. Yes,
Yeah,
let's
we
do
should
this.
totally do that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yay.
That's happening.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Look at building community right here at the Asian Art Museum.
Yeah.
Thank you again, Jeff.
Thank you so much.
You were tremendous.
Really appreciate
Also,
it.
everyone here, if you haven't gotten the book, highly, highly, highly recommend. I think the bookstore is currently sold out, but you can get it wherever books are sold. Listeners at home, the book is tremendous. Go get it. And shout out to my favorite AAPI bookshop of all time on Waverly for their support today and us getting this book. And also, just always, I got my copy there a month ago. It's great. Check them out. And thank you all for being here. We appreciate you taking the time and spending the day. See y'all next time.
Thank you.
Woo.